I'm Dorothea Lantz. I'm the Director of Community Engagement with PWSA USA. I have a 6-year-old son with Prader-Willi Syndrome. This is actually my first time. It's a really exciting opportunity, and really the connection that I have and that the PWS community has is that Soleno, whose CEO is Anish, is developing a drug to treat symptoms of PWS. That drug is called DCCR. We've been through the mill with this drug, dealing with the regulatory issues at the FDA. But the good thing that's come out of it is that Soleno has kind of united our PWS community and helped us advocate on a much larger scale. So that's really my connection to this summit. You know, what's interesting about what's happening in the PWS space right now is that 3 years ago, our drug trial situation was pretty much in shambles. COVID threw a monkey wrench into all of the research that was going on in the PWS space. And then as we've progressed out of COVID, we currently have 6 drug trials underway, which is extremely exciting. Nothing's been done in our space. We haven't had an approved drug to treat PWS since the year 2000. And that drug is growth hormone, which doesn't do anything to address the hallmark symptom of PWS, which is hyperphagia. So all of the drugs that are being researched right now in our space are addressing different aspects of PWS. For example, DCCR is addressing hyperphagia specifically, but is also shown to benefit people who are suffering with anxiousness, daytime sleepiness. We have another study that's addressing exclusively daytime sleepiness, which is already approved to treat narcolepsy and cataplexy. We have another drug that is actually addressing hyperphagia by working in the gut, and it's tricking the brain into thinking that they're full. It basically tricks your brain into thinking that they've been poisoned, so it shuts off your need to eat. We have another study that's looking on developing additional neuron connections in the brain from ages 4 through 12. So all of these really exciting things are going on. And what's exciting about PWS is that things that work for the general population don't typically work for PWS. But drugs that are seeming to work to treat symptoms of PWS are also they also make connections and seem to be working in the general population. So when I look at treatment for our disease specifically, I look at an opportunity for us to branch out around the world and address different symptoms and different diseases, be it rare or not, in other parts of the world. So for example, there are a lot of aspects of PWS that you will find in somebody who has autism. So there are a lot of autistic type behaviors. So if we can find a drug that is addressing some of those symptoms in our community, it's very likely that it's something that can be reworked to help treat other diseases, which opens us up globally, because we may not have PWS may not be recognized in a lot of places, and that's something that we're working to establish. But if we have a drug that does treat other symptoms associated with PWS that affect other diseases that are recognized in places around the world, then that gives us an opportunity as a rare disease to really expand our horizons and do much more than just helping the rare disease community. And that's one of the things that I tell our advocates all the time. We have the ability to do more than just help PWS. We have the ability, with the research that's being done in our space, to help other spectrum disorders that sit on chromosome 15. And being able to expand that outside of the United States would just be monumental. And hopefully encourage drug trials for PWS in other parts of the world. I've been doing advocacy with PWSA for just over 2 years. And when I started, to be honest with you, we didn't have much of an advocacy program. It's always been a pillar of our organization, but we do so much work in the family development space that it's been really hard for us to focus on advocacy. And we also really haven't had much of an opportunity to work with any other countries, because there's been so much lacking in the world of drug development to treat this rare disease. But over the last 2 years, that is starting to evolve. It's starting to change. I haven't been able to see a direct connection with other countries yet. This is the first opportunity that I've really had to see where it is that we can expand our advocacy efforts and start to make these global connections. I'm looking forward to it because as our advocacy here in the States has expanded, and we've been able to connect with policymakers and regulatory institutions like the FDA, like the NIH. I think it's just a matter of time before we're able to broaden our horizons and really start to work on a global level. We do actually have a global organization. It's called IPSO, which is the International Prader-Willi Syndrome Organization. So some of the studies that we see going on, for example, to treat symptoms of PWS in France, is something that we're slowly starting to bring over into the United States. There's also a different trial that's taking place in Hungary, and they've just launched some U.S. sites. I believe 7 U.S. sites, which is exciting because we're starting to see that global connection. Unfortunately, it's with smaller countries or European countries that have, they have a different way of looking at drugs than the FDA does. Being able to connect with a larger country like India, I think would be extremely impactful at the way we look at the regulatory process. So if we're able, the FDA is much more apt to consider data from the EU than it is any other country from around the world. And I think that that is something that absolutely has to change when we're looking at the most populous countries in the world. So I'm hoping that by starting that expansion with trials that are going on in France and trials that are going on in Hungary, that this type of global connection with India, Africa, Asia, I'm hoping that it opens up those doors for our community. I think the level of energy, the eagerness to want to work together, it's something that has surprised me a lot over the past couple of years, and seeing such a global presence here today, I think it's just that level of engagement, and it's also you hear of the need, right? You hear of the need in other countries, the lack of healthcare, the lack of ability to have physicians treating different rare diseases, rare diseases, just disease in general. To be able to see the engagement of this community was pleasantly surprising to me, and inspirational, and a little bit motivating. I see us working together more, and I'm really excited over the next 2 years. I know I won't be able to go to the next conference in India, but I'm hoping that in 2025 I'm able to come back here and we have twice as many people, and twice as many people engaged. And I'd love to be able to bring more of our PWS advocates. We do receive, even though we have an international organization, we actually receive calls on a weekly basis from countries all over the world who don't have access to services, don't even have access to growth hormone. The diet situation with people who have PWS is much different than other rare diseases because of hyperphagia. So it's something from a cultural standpoint that we see is very different and has to be addressed differently throughout the rest of the world. So that's something I think we as an organization and as a rare disease is something that we can work on over the next couple of years, so we can start to build a more cohesive PWS family globally. So Prader-Willi syndrome falls on chromosome 15, and a lot of spectrum disorders fall on chromosome 15. So what I would like to get a better understanding of, and I'm hoping, I'm not a scientist by any means, and I'm an MD in training, I guess. What I'm hoping is to I'm hoping to see if we can find more connection between these spectrum disorders, especially the rare disease spectrum disorders like Angelman, for example. Angelman is the exact opposite of Prader-Willi syndrome. So I feel like as we're going through this journey together with rare diseases, it makes sense that diseases that fall so close together on the same chromosome should be studied together, and could possibly be more of an incentive for industry to really invest in rare disease, because let's face it, it's ridiculously expensive to conduct a rare disease trial, and they can cost upwards of $500 million. I think one of the trials today was it took $1 billion to come up with this one drug. In order to make it make sense for an investor to want to invest in a high risk investment like rare disease research and not just put their money in a bank and earn 8% there. I think that we need to think outside of the box, and we need to be able to start grouping some of these rare diseases together and see if we can come up with therapies that can treat symptoms of both. So, for example, we have 3 different subtypes in PWS. We have deletion, we have UPD, and then we have the inherited version. And it's 70% of the time it's a deletion. 20% of the time it's UPD, and then the remaining portion is like the inherited version of PWS. So, and that's of course the rarest of rare. And depending on your subtype, your symptoms of one thing or the other might be more or less. So for example, people with deletion are typically more prone to hyperphagia, whereas people with UPD typically have more of the neurological issues such as seizures, psychosis, and things like that as they age. So I'd like to be able to see, people with Angelman syndrome suffer greatly from seizures. So perhaps there's a connection that we can make with our UPD subtype and a subtype of Angelman that could make sense for both of our communities. And just stimulate research, generate investment dollars, make it look appealing. So, yeah. So advocacy is just kind of in my blood. And I feel like people who have a relation to rare disease, whether it's a child, a grandchild, or a sibling, are personally invested in the development of drugs to treat those rare diseases. And with this community here today, I think that rare disease is touching each one of us in a different way, whether they're a scientist, a physician, a caregiver, or a patient themselves. And I'm inspired to see this cross collaboration. And advocacy is at the root of everything that we do in the rare disease space. You know what? Without proper regulatory flexibilities, without proper policy in place, we won't get anywhere in the rare disease community. Without proper policy, innovation will be stifled. Research and development will be stifled. We've seen that just over the past year with some of the things that Congress has implemented. We've seen that over the past couple of years, just with portions of the FDA not exercising their own regulatory flexibility. So advocating is at the heart of what we have to do in order to have our voices heard. People forget that rare disease isn't rare, right? That it's the 1 out of 10, which we were talking about earlier. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So I think it's important for us to have a collective voice, and being able to do that on a global scale just compounds our voice and makes it that much stronger and that much louder. Policymakers will listen. And this rare disease is it's a human issue. It's not a red issue, it's not a blue issue, it's a human rights issue. Our loved ones with rare diseases, they have a right to be here. They have a right to health care. They have a right to treatment. They have a right to typical lives. They have a right to life. So I feel like through advocacy and on the global scale, I feel like this is what we have to do. We have to keep compounding our voices, and whether it's within the United States or whether it's globally, we just need to keep having our voices heard.